and welcome to the Cardboard Herald podcast. I am Eric, joined as always by my lovely co-host Jack. How are you doing today, Jack?
I'm less full of beans than last week, and I'm ready to talk about board games.
That's going to be a real bummer for that listener who contributed his own fabulous bean story.
Hey, some people show up for it. Some people are here for the bean talk. I got some coffee that's bean adjacent, but we'll pass on the beans today, and maybe we'll revisit beans at another point.
I've been thinking we need to fully rebrand our channel to be Bonanza themed.
That is a bean board game. Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of people think of Bonanza as Uwe Rosenberg's best game, which is a hard sell when it's next to Agricola and Patchwork and a bajillion other great games. But it's certainly one of the best open trading games. I don't know. Bonanza themed podcast. Maybe we'll do our deep dive at another point.
Well, thank you for tuning in to our listeners. This week, I've been playing a lot of, in my mind, classics. I haven't played anything that's like the new hotness. I got Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition to the table. My wife and I played that, and this was the first time that she just obliterated me, which is good. Is good for the game to keep making its way to the table, because I do like it a lot. But typically that's a game where I either eke out a win or I win by a margin, but I've never beaten her by as much as she beat me this most recent time, which is good, is a good thing.
Do you have the expansion that adds the achievements and milestones?
No, I don't have the Discovery Cities or Crisis expansion. It's just on-rip base Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. Though I did look into those after we finished playing, just to see where the prices were for them. Because we got I could add some more. That's a game that we play enough that it would make sense to have some expansions for it.
Yeah, well, Terraforming Mars really had my heart for a long while, and I guess it still does. Ares Expedition ultimately is my favorite of the line, and I actually have a review of Terraforming Mars dice game coming out here soon. I just uploaded that, so it's in the can. We got a lot of stuff in the can. More stuff than usual in the can, so we're figuring that out. But one of the things that I recall when I first played Ares Expedition that I missed was the lack of the achievements and milestones. And when they added that in the expansion, I was like, well, there's nothing at this point that's really making me go back to the original. And I let go of the OG and just kept Ares Expedition at that point. Which I might have done anyway if they hadn't added that stuff. But that kind of took it to the level where I was like, I'm good with this.
Yeah, and I think that's a totally reasonable, I think Ares Expedition is a lot of the best of Terraforming Mars. Terraforming Mars absolutely has a place in my heart, as I know it also has a place in yours, that it's just this is a super great game. There's nothing wrong with it. But Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition just gets what I want out of the game more. And I think this is actually a fun topic for us to come back to once we get to our main discussion for the week. I also got Imperium Horizons played, another solo round of that. The Martians are so weird, and I love it. That's one of the new civilizations, and it's just the
Imperium stands have all come out in force for your personal top 10 video.
Yeah, they're
everyone's tell Jack what's up. Get that guy out of here.
Well, and I think it's just if you're a solo gamer, there's just nothing that does what Imperium does in terms of Spirit Island is definitely another thing that brings a lot of, you have so many different ways to play this game depending on what spirit you have, and you can have a lot of different adversaries. And
You can
that's
have adversities as well. I'll allow it.
the adversities are the adversaries, and also some of the events, depending on what you pull.
Right.
But between them and everything else, like Spirit Island is an amazing solo game, but Imperium Horizons is at least to me like in that ballpark when it comes to solo games.
Right.
And it's just so tough considering how much I'm scared of it as a multiplayer game. Like Spirit Island, I think is fun as a multiplayer game. Like I think that once you get up to like 4 people, it's maybe too much. But like as a 2-person thing, Spirit Island is like a great game. But Imperium Horizons, or really any of the Imperium ones, even 2 players is like, this is just so much like unnecessary stuff going on.
Well, I'm looking at the artwork for the Martians, and the Martians artwork, the illustrations that are being showcased are amazing, and they make me want to play this game again.
Yeah.
Which is something that I've said for a while. I need to revisit, see if anything kind of recontextualizes my early experiences with the game, and especially those comparisons to Spirit Island. I think the thing about Spirit Island with going to higher player counts, though, that can be maybe the best but also the worst aspect of it, is that it being a cooperative game, you're so concerned with playing to the team that everyone is like, well, what are you going to do? I don't know. What are you going to do? Well, what if I do this? Well, if you do that, then I can do this. And then, okay, well, what can you do over here? And what are we going to do about that? And that puzzle becomes exponentially more challenging to navigate the more players that you have if you're trying to work in concert in any way. That can be a really fun aspect of that game, but it can also get to like dizzying levels of crunch to anticipate the various things that could happen and the best ways that you can mitigate that from happening. Imperium, sure, it's a complex system, and it's a complex system for one person or a couple people, and teaching might be difficult, but do you feel like that sort of compound escalation is something that would happen to that same degree if you were playing with higher player counts?
I think it's less. The reason I am not the biggest fan of Imperium as a multiplayer is, one, the game doesn't really give you a ton of ways to interact with other people. Like there are some ways. Like there are definitely attack cards. There are in the new expansion there is like trading, where like you can like see what other cards people have played and you can trade with them, which gives you both things. Mm-hmm. Like you there's a way to interact with other players in that way. But for the most part, it is fully you are head down looking at what you're doing. And that's kind of the biggest concern. Like, you're sometimes competing for cards in the market, but most of the time, you're not really. And also, some decks just don't even want to participate in the market. Like, your goal is just to get through your deck as quickly as possible to get your better cards into your deck. And so you don't really want to add cards. Like, there's those, that's only a few of them. Most of them want to interact with the cards in the market, but there's just so much of I'm doing my thing right here, and it kind of doesn't concern you, which makes it where it's like, okay, it's fine as like it's not like objectively bad as multiplayer, but then you have the teaching the game is aggressive. You can do most of your turn. Like, whoever is going after you, you have to, like, wait until they're done because they might do something that affects you. So you can't just, like, overlap your turns in a way that is effective, because they might play an attack card which makes you abandon a land that you want to have in play for the start of your turn. And so it's just like, okay, well, now I'm going to wait for you to look at your cards and think for the next 3-4 minutes. Mm-hmm. Just because there is like a lot of how do I get the most out of this hand of cards? And like you can keep cards, so it's not like you have to make that decision. It's not as pressing as like other deck builders where you do have to like these are the only times you're going to see these cards for like the next few turns. Yeah, I would say for me it's just like because there's not a ton of play interaction, but there's a little bit. It's a lot of I'm waiting for the other person to finish their turn so I can take my turn, and it's just a lot more waiting than it needs to be, and you could use that time to think about what you're going to do on your turn. But again, because they can do like one or two things that like aggressively changes how your turn is, maybe most of the time there isn't, but every deck pretty much has a card that will make you abandon a land that they might play if they have 3 lands themselves. So it's all like, it's just not the best multiplayer game.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty well recognized by the community, right? Most people say that it's best as a solo or two-player game. And it's okay for games to, like cater specifically to that audience with the consolation prize or the consideration being the larger, more expanded player counts. But ideally, it's designed for and gets the most out of the lower player count stuff. As far as things that I've been playing, I don't know if I've actually talked about this on our podcast, but our buddy Michael Dunsmore, who's with, he's now with Asmodee North America, formerly Fantasy Flight. He's now on the Star Wars Unlimited team, and he got me to play Star Wars Unlimited. He didn't strong-arm me. At PlatypusCon, I was like, hey, you're here, you're working on this game now, why don't I just buy some pre-cons, let's play it, you can teach me, and that way I'm supporting a friend, I'm checking this out, I don't really have an interest in the CCG. I bought a bunch of Star Wars Unlimited stuff now. I've taught Syrian how to play, he's 10 years old, and he's like, I like this because it's more complicated than Pokemon, it's less complicated than Magic. I think he actually used the words, it's more strategic than Pokemon and less complicated than Magic, which really is the zone that it kind of threads. And it's just a really pleasant, tactical card game. I like that in a very simple structure with a reliable resource system. You're forced to make a lot of interesting tactical decisions. I played it with a friend of mine who I often play Magic with. He's the one who gets me to test out his new commanders and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he also recognized that for as simple as the cards seem in theory, they are much more simplistic than a lot of Magic or other CCGs. Less text on the cards. The decision space, because you're alternating actions instead of taking a full turn and the other player's taking a turn, the tactical decisions and the kind of opportunity cost of when you do what you do and how soon you reveal or exhaust the various resources that you have makes for some fun times. I don't know how far down the rabbit hole I'm going to go. Clearly I bought some packs, bought some precons, bought some cool deck boxes. So long as my kid is interested, I'm going to continue playing that with him, but I don't know what opportunities I'm going to really have to play a lot of it otherwise. But I'm having fun. Other than that, some things that have been cool going on here. So I have long followed the career of Rita Orlov, who is the owner and principal designer for Post Curious. She's a friend of the show. We, at this point, hang out when we go to PAX Unplugged. I've done escape rooms with her. She's a fascinating individual. I love how her brain operates, and I love the kind of crypto puzzle tale designs that she makes. And recently I was contacted by someone from TED, and they were working on TED Games. I was like, TED Games? I'm like, wait, what's going on here? And I'm talking like TED Talks TED.
Yeah, that TED.
And
not the teddy
TED,
bear.
Not the teddy bear. And they were like, hey, we have partnered with a puzzle creator, Rita Orlov, and we're working on this puzzle narrative game mystery box that's called Pandora's Legacy, and do you want to check it out? And I was like, of course I do. Anything that Rita's worked on, I am here for. So I got that to the table. It's very different than what I'm used to from Rita as a designer, and I don't know what level of co-design or consultation that she gave on this. She's listed as a co-designer, but it's a literal jigsaw puzzle, but there are all kinds of other boxes within the box that have presumably additional things, like we've unlocked one thing that was like, whoa, this is kind of a crazy thing, and how's this going to interact with everything else? It seems really well put together. Beautiful presentation. I can already see in the little intricate artwork that kind of has a Where's Waldo by way of ancient Greece vibe, that it is going to have all kinds of weird in-depth puzzles, based off of how many stones are where and what drawings are indicating this, and if you connect the zodiac creatures, or there's probably a bajillion things that on first glance just seem innocuous, and then upon closer inspection and as you go deeper and deeper and deeper, it's going to reveal a lot more. So we're having a lot of fun. I'm doing that with the family. It's chewing up a lot of time, so
yeah.
I'm glad that I have a game table where I can put something else on top of it, and yet leave that out. But that's pretty cool. Only other thing is, did an interview with John D. Clare just last night. That should be up on the channel soon, and that was really great to talk to a designer about just like what full-time freelance game work is like. Like how he structures his day, how he's changed in his creative process over time, what decisions he made about when he wanted to lean into his career full-time, how much push and pull he gets into with publishers when they want to make changes to the designs that he proposes. One of the more fascinating interviews that I've ever done on this channel, and he seems like a really great guy. So that should be coming up here soon.
Cool. I mean, that sounds rad. That sounds like a really cool interview. I'm excited to give it a listen when it comes up.
Yeah.
Quick note on Pandora's Legacy. It sounds like it's not the exact same thing, but I'd be very interested to try it out, because it sounds like you do a jigsaw puzzle and then you have Micro Macro Crime City on the jigsaw puzzle.
Yes, but
in some ways. It sounds like there's also a lot more layers into how that works. But yeah, that sounds rad.
It's got some elements of Micro Macro Crime City. It's got some elements of like a Where's Waldo type of thing. It's got a traditional, jigsaw puzzle approach. It looks like it has some inspiration from the Magic Puzzle series, which I've done several of those at this point, where they're jigsaw puzzles that once you complete, you kind of rearrange them like sections of them, almost like a Mad magazine, and it reveals secret truths within. And that's pretty cool. But there's actually things in other boxes that we're only allowed to interact with once we've gotten to a certain stage. And at least one of those things is a big, chunky, thematic thing without revealing anymore. It was something that was not expected was going to be in the next box, and it has utility in the physical world as it relates to this whole thing, which was kind of cool.
Is it Screwdriver?
Yes, it was a screwdriver.
Nailed it. I had the Sixth Sense on that. Someone
Uh-huh.
call Haley
Yep.
Joel Osment.
There you go.
Get him in here.
Perfect.
That game sounds super interesting, and I am excited to give it a try once I get my hands on it. It sounds like Rita's doing a great job on the co-design. And it sounds like, maybe if you like that game enough, it could be maybe in your favorite games, which is the topic this week.
What a transition. What a transition.
Man, I'm getting really good at transitioning to our podcast topic each week.
See,
I did the jazz hands and everything there.
Is I don't know if that's sincere or sarcasm. And I don't know anymore. Like, I'm too close. I'm no longer objective. So our audience is going to have to evaluate how you're doing on your transition work here.
Yeah, please comment down below whether or not my transitioning is being good or bad. Yeah, so I pitched this topic because Jack and I both now have put out our favorite games, or top 10 is what we called them. Top 10 games of 2024. And when I was making mine, I had a lot of thoughts of, like, what am I saying with this list when I say this game is my top game or these are my top 10 games? Like, and how do I go about quantifying that? And I think that the concept of somebody's favorite game is like such a nebula thing that is hard to quantify. And yet every board game YouTuber does it every year.
Right. And like even that title, right? When Eric originally did that video, he had it listed as his favorite games, and I changed it to top games, and part of that is because favorite does not get traction on YouTube. Top gets traction on YouTube because there's at least the hint or suggestion of objectivity, like that this is a definitive top, whereas favorite feels more squishy. But anytime that we're talking about ranking craft or art, it's always going to be incredibly subjective, so like all of this is favorite when it comes down to it.
Yeah, and I think that it's like it's clear that that's what we're doing with it. Like, we're not saying, like, you and I aren't, I think pretty much every YouTuber is not saying like, oh, these are the objectively top games of the year. They're saying these are their personal favorite games that have come out this year. And I think that there's a distinction that we say the word top, but the I don't think anybody, I really hope they aren't, like looking at it being like, oh, this is a objective list. Some people might. I hope that they don't.
I think you are giving far too much credit to the average person putting anything online. Even us. At a certain point, you're like, like, you can be considerate. You can be, like, well, I don't know, this is kind of favorite, but it might not be your thing. But, all those people who are ranking, like, Marvel movies, like, I'm pretty sure they're convinced that Brie Larson is the worst actress of all time. You know what I'm talking about? Like, there are a lot of people who think that their opinion is objective. So you proposed this topic, favorite games. What makes a favorite? Not just like us rattling off what our favorite games are, but like what makes our favorite games our favorite games. What are those threads or commonalities, the things that we really react to in games? And while I did think this was kind of like a nebulous topic, I was interested. I didn't go like, Okay, I'm vetoing this because I wanted to see where this goes. Because for me, I actually kind of think it's a cool baseline. We talk about our favorite games and we talk about what are our favorite aspects of those games, but we don't necessarily have a video where we're talking about like what is it we like about games.
Yeah.
What, what is it that gets us going when we're playing a game?
Yeah, and I think that, maybe in theory, if someone watches through all the reviews, they can pick up things where it's like, oh, Jack likes games that have this trait more than this trait. And that could be accurate. But I think us talking about what we kind of feel makes a game go higher up in our favorite games list versus things that we are like generally wary of playing again. And then also kind of when I think of my favorite game, am I thinking of like empirically the best game, or am I thinking of the game that I've played the most or the game that I've had the most cumulative fun with? And for me, at least on that topic, I think that I go with games that I've just had the most cumulative fun with, rather than what I think is like the best technical game. Because like there on my ranking list or on my top 10 list, like I had Arcs number one, which that one you could see as like me picking empirically. This is what I think the best mechanical game is this year,
Right.
which is in my mind not the case. It's just that that's the game I've had the most fun playing, even if I've played it less times than some of the other games on the list. Like Harmony's got up there because I've had a ton of fun playing that game, even if it's not like the most mechanically challenging to think through everything you're doing, but like it just works and it's really fun. And every time I've played it, I have had a ton of fun. And so for me, it's less like this is the game I've played the most, or this is the game that I had really fun playing once, but it's more I want to keep playing this game. Like this is a game that I come back to frequently because I like playing it.
Yeah, I'm trying to not be that page that is torn out in Dead Poet Society where it's like a rubric on how to evaluate the quality of a poem, right? And I can't bring it down to like units of fun that I've had per minute playing or anything like that. And there are a lot of intangibles. Like, for example, last night we broke out Dinosaur Island Roar and Write, which is a game that I really enjoyed when I first played it. I played it a few times. I think at this point, this may be my 10th play, but we hadn't played it in a while. And I was like, before we do Pandora's Legacy, let's play this. And then after playing it, I was like, man, I really love this game. And like that sort of quality, like I don't know that I was prepared to give an evaluation of how much fun I had or like how well designed or well balanced it was, but there was just a feeling of something about this works, and it's inescapable. And I think that's what I really latch on to when it comes to like a favorite game, something that just speaks to me on an almost subconscious primal level, that I really enjoy it. Now I can dissect from there, and I think that it's a big part of what we're going to do here. But I think maybe starting off, some questions. Um, Aside from fun, what are some of the things that you think really speak to you? Commonalities on games that you're going to be more favorable towards in general.
I think the biggest trait I think I see between what I consider my favorite games are having a somewhat unique experience every time. Now that doesn't have to be player asymmetry, though that's definitely like helps out a lot, but like I really enjoyed Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition because depending on what random cards you get dealt at the very beginning of the game, you have so many different directions you can take your play. You also get corporations to start off with, which offers a little bit of asymmetry, but it's not like you have to play into that asymmetry or you will lose. Like I think even that much where it's just like there's so many cards in the deck that you're just going to have a different play style every single time you play. That to me is like a huge commonality in things that I consider my favorite games. So like also Arcs is the one I put on my top 10 of this year. That one has so much replayability, like just between the different leaders in lore through the leaders in lore pack and all of the just who you're playing against, what cards you get dealt. That's a trait that I see in pretty much all of the games that I consider my favorite games.
Yeah, I by the way, I played a 4-player game of Arcs at PlatypusCon. It was amazing. I did not do well, but it was still amazing. We had the leaders in lore. It was just a great time.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when I think about my favorite games, either of this year or in general, I think that there's definitely certain categories, certain metrics that I might be able to score them on, and come up with some sort of ranking system. Very intentionally, the Cardboard Herald does not have a scoring system. I set out from the very beginning to not do that. I was inspired by Giant Bomb, who was and I guess still is, a video game podcast and channel that was born out of old GameSpot and then kind of evolved, and they were a big inspiration on what we did here. But yeah, so we don't have specific categories, but for the purposes of this discussion, originality is something that like I care about. I try to think, is this something new? Is this a new take on something that's pre-existing? How comparable is this to the experiences that I'd have with other games? If I'm thinking about the games that I want to keep in my collection, I do think about redundancy, and like how many of a specific type of game that I can have. And for example, Wondrous Creatures is a game that I really enjoyed, but did not make my list. It made Christina's list for sure, and it was on our overall list, but personal list, I couldn't put it there because it shared so much DNA with so many other games I love. So that was one of the big holdoffs. Then there's also the like design space. Interesting decisions is always what I'm looking for. I don't necessarily need a lot of variety, but I do need interesting decisions that I don't know the answer to. And I don't know that I really had put my thumb on this until that conversation with John Clare last night, where he was talking about when he designs games, because I was giving him guff. He was at the convention here. He taught me how to play Mistborn, and he beat me. And I asked him if he only designs games that he's better at than other people. And that was actually a very fun conversation to go down. But he did say that sometimes it's actually the opposite. If he's naturally good at a game and it's instinctive, then he grows bored of it. So he does not want to design games where he automatically knows the right answer. And I think that's true for me as a gamer. Like I don't want obvious plays. I want there to be a degree of risk and a degree of challenge, whether it's against the opponent I'm playing or the system itself. Vibrance is a big part of it. Like I tend to like visually evocative games, like something that has bold color palettes or really dramatic presence. That doesn't have to be super colorful, like a really great chessboard with really distinctive pieces can be something that speaks to me. It can be super minimalistic, like I would say Harmonies is a game that is abstracted and overall fairly minimalistic, but just has a very dramatic look to it and presence. And my favorite games tend to play in that zone. And I will, take away points from a game, so to speak, if it just kind of looks bland.
Yeah.
Like if it doesn't have style, like that essence, that vigor. I need something there. And then from there, I think some of the things that I most often like, mechanically speaking, are when there's a greater emphasis on fewer but more important decisions than a huge decision space. Like whether that's a really big game or a really small game, I like when the emphasis is on opportunity cost. Like if I do this now, that's going to have really big ramifications down the road, and I'm going to have to kind of live with that, rather than just having like, well, there's about 37 different things that I could do right now, and getting overwhelmed by that. So fewer but important decisions are what I usually gravitate to in games.
Yeah, I think I also believe that having fuzziness is important. Fuzziness of like, I don't know which of these decisions is the right one. Brings so much in terms of you can play this game across multiple skill levels and have at least a chance that the person with lower skill will win. Like that's definitely a thing that I enjoy, having games where I'm like, this is a game I like a lot. I'm going to show this to, like, Harmonies, for example. This is a game that I like a lot. I brought it home to play with my parents.
Right.
They're not typical gamers. It felt good that this game was like, my mom could maybe beat me. She didn't, but she definitely got close and got better. And
In
my
your
sister,
face, Mom. Your meerkats ain't got nothing on me. Do you see this
like,
puffin here? This puffin owns your face.
This puffin be puffin right now. My sister, who is also like, she plays some games, but she's not like what I would call a hardcore gamer or anything like that. She did beat me several times, and like I had played this game multiple times, like solo, not solo, before playing it with her, and she was able to beat. I think the very first game we played, she won. I think that it is really awesome to give some fuzziness just so that people have a chance to win from the start. They might lose off of their choices later on, but like having at least there's a reasonable chance they will win if they're a lower skill level is a thing that I think is really helpful. I also think that a game that gives you enough avenues to victory that if you are playing against a lower skill level player or a person who's newer to the game when you've played for a while, that you can go, okay, well, I'm going to try out this weird strategy that I haven't really done before. Like having that option in games is another thing that I find typically makes me want to play a game more. Like going back to Terraforming Mars, either Ares Expedition or the base game, you can go in a lot of weird ways of, okay, well, I'm going to try out titanium this game. I'm going to try to like really ramp up titanium production and see how much I can do with that in a game that I wouldn't, that's not always the get-go.
How egalitarian are you with your games? Like, are you very... does an emotional component, impact which games are your favorite? Is there, something that you're sentimental about. Is that going to impact what's your favorite? Of
Yeah.
course, all these things can be there on a subconscious level, but I think that games facilitate social experiences, and also, like anything else, come and go at different points in our lives, and there can be a certain nostalgia attached to games. There can be other meta emotional components that may impact whether something is, like a favorite game.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say like Harvest is a game I have on my top 10 list that I like totally enjoyed. I think it's a great worker placement. I can't say for certain if I would have had it ranked as high as I did if I didn't have like the experience of playing it with like my really good friends, between you, Christina, and then I think we also played with Connor at Platypus, or at one of the Platypus Gaming Devils Club
Oh yeah,
nights. But
yeah.
it's just like
Yep.
playing that game with you guys was just like, oh, this is a super. This game is really fun because it facilitates that I'm invested in what the other people at the stable are doing, and I'm really good friends with the other people at the stable, so that I care what they're doing because the game wants me to, and I also care what they're doing because they're my friends. Like if I played Harvest exclusively on like Board Game Arena with strangers, I I I just don't know for sure if I would rank it as high as I did.
Right.
And that's nothing to say with like whether or not that game is good or for me, but it's just like having that game I think works really well because it helps facilitate interaction with other players at the table. And if I know the other players at my table, I'm going to have a much better experience because of that. So that definitely plays into it, where it's like the emotional experience for this game to me is attached to the game. Like I can't
Right.
separate that.
And I think when we're really thinking about what our favorite games are, it would be probably the games that we would preserve in our collection over others. There are some function, like you're going to hold on to games that you think you're going to get played. But if I were to drop my collection to 20 games right now, there's a good chance Game of Thrones Second Edition would be one of those. I do very much like that game. It is a big, stompy war game that kind of goes into the diplomacy zone. I really like it. But I also have a very strong emotional attachment, both to the fictional world, which I've dedicated so many hours to books and to theory videos and all kinds of stuff, to, like the experiences I've had with a core group of friends at a particular point in my life where we were playing that every other weekend or something. And so, like that's one that I would have a real hard time getting rid of, even if I'm really not playing Game of Thrones Second Edition anymore. Like I don't know how soon I'm going to get it played, but that is one of my favorite gaming experiences. That isn't a sole deciding factor on whether I keep it, because I've gotten rid of other games. I've gotten rid of Hero Quest, which is probably the most visceral gaming experience that I've had ever in my life. I don't hold on to Magic cards or Legend of the Five Rings, which I've had long dalliances with over time. But, like that emotional component can be part of what I decide goes into things. Or what part of the sum total of what makes this game great. And just like our discussion earlier on about like components, we had another podcast where we talked about components, and it wasn't like good components can save a bad game from being bad, but they can make a good game into one that's great. I think the same can be said about like this emotional component. And even the story of a game can do that too. Like I was thinking about how there are these two games, Earthborn Rangers and Leviathan Wilds, that are like phoenixes rising from the ashes of what was once Fantasy Flight Games and Z-Man Games, purchased by Asmodee, and becoming these new studios, Mooncrab and Earthborn Games, to release these two titles. And they're really good games. But the fact that they come from this storied history makes me enjoy them even more. You know, like that makes me more willing to see past some structural flaws and really focus on what makes them unique and interesting and fun. It wouldn't make a bad game good, but it certainly does enhance that like quality of what can make a great game into a favorite for me.
Yeah. And I think the last major topic I have on this is when we especially as people who post videos on YouTube, when we make a list that's our top 10 of the year, what are we saying about the games that we are putting on there? Like, are we saying that these are we've kind of I think touched on a lot of the topics just because we have been talking about like best versus favorite, but are we saying like these are the games that we think will have the most wide appeal? Or at least for me, when I make the list, one, it is just like these are the games that I have gotten the most fun out of. And I kind of think about like, I'm not, if two games are like relatively pretty similar, I might go like, well, I think this one is probably going to be the one that has a more broad appeal. And like, again, this is like, because it's hard to quantify this fun experience that we have. But for me, it's a little bit, I'm putting it out there as a reviewer. These are the 10 games I found the most enjoyable this year. Do with that information what you will. Like, I know that people were, at least on my video, were like, Arcs is terrible. And that's an opinion that they are allowed to have. I'm not saying they can't have that opinion.
Well,
but
they're objectively wrong, but no.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like, they now know that about me as a reviewer. And I think that kind of helps inform them going forward. If I like a game, this is what I like about it. And typically, if they think the opposite of me, then maybe they're going to hate a game that I like. But I think that's still like a valuable data point for people, especially since we are posting things to the channel frequently.
Right. And I try to not think too much about what the audience is going to think about a game. And I am also trying very hard to not make purchasing decisions the end goal here. We don't do, like paid for content. We've dabbled in that very lightly in the past, and it was very, very heavily disclaimered anytime that we did that. But I try to not, and maybe this is just pretending for myself, right? This is my own peace of mind. But I try to not make it just like this is a commercial for this consumer product. I do want to think about like, what does this game mean? And is this a game that I would want to play? What is novel and what is interesting? And what is exciting about this game and what isn't? What's frustrating about this game? What would I want to warn my friends about if they were going to play this game? What would I want them to know? Like that's kind of the perspective that I try to take at any time that I'm evaluating a game. And I agree. I don't think that basically any game is for everyone. I want to share my excitement if it's a game that I really like, and I want to make it very transparent, the things that I'm into and why I like it. But if you know where the points are that you as an audience and me as a reviewer disagree, then you can use that to better understand and contextualize the stuff that I'm talking about and commenting on later. As far as the top tens, the only other thing that I would say, other than this is me trying to speak for like what are the games that truly got me excited that I think and expect and hope that in years to come I will look back favorably on, because I try to evaluate, is this a flash in the pan that I don't care about, and is kind of like a disposable thing, a momentary excitement, but then I'm no longer going to think about that. I try to separate out those, and then to a degree, I'm doing some advocacy, by way of reviews. These are the games that I want to see more of. These are the types of things that I want to see more of. And that's where that originality comes into play. That's where those stories come into play. Like, I think Leviathan Wilds ended up on the top of my list because I wanted to celebrate that this is a new studio doing a novel thing. And there are some slightly rough edges on that game, things that I think I would hold a much, much more experienced studio accountable to, but I can look past a lot of those by way of all of the things that it does right. And it is just an effing good game.
Yeah.
Like, it is just an effing great game that I love playing. But these awards can be a degree of advocacy. This is what I want to see more of, and so I am highlighting these games.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it, where it's, these lists are also, there are our opinion of what games we think people should be taking a look at. Yeah. We have a listener contribution. It's less of a question, but more, I think there are some interesting points in here, even if some of the specific games mentioned I might disagree with. But from Retromatic Gamer, we posted saying, tell us about your favorites. What makes a game a favorite? Is it, best or, just favorite? And
wait,
I'm a poet with words.
Yeah, clearly. Do you talk about games on YouTube?
I should.
Yeah.
But from Retromatic Gamer, the contribution is no, fantastic does not equal best. There are fantastic games that are well balanced and rich, but I simply don't find them interesting enough to replay. I'm bored to death of Terraforming Mars and Dune Imperium. Other games are unfair or unbalanced, but outright addictive. Dominion, The Crew, Cosmic Encounter. Mansions of Madness might be better than Betrayal at House on the Hill, but I always have more fun with the latter because it's less predictable or fair. Like a real horror story. Best game I ever played, I'd say Ark Nova, but BGG would say it's Brass Birmingham. My favorite, however, is neither. Despite its flaws, the games I'll never say no to are Res Arcana, Dinosaur Island, and Great Western Trail. I always want to play them. And I think a lot of those points kind of get to a lot of what we were saying, which is favorite is the game that we want to come back to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even if and we talked a lot at this podcast about Terraforming Mars. We clearly don't think it's boring to death, but that's a totally fair opinion to have for other games. There are games that I think are mechanically well designed, but they're just not fun.
Yeah, I think best is an attempt at objectivity, whereas favorite is clearly an acceptance of subjectivity. And that's where you get to all those emotional components, the personal evaluation. But I think, we, in spite of me talking about all these things, hopefully I haven't lost all of my critical integrity to the audience where they're like, oh, Jack just wants, to highlight games with good stories. He doesn't give a crap if it's, a actually well-balanced game or anything like that. No, I care about all that stuff. And that's where I start. And that's part of the core of me, like having fun with the game. Is it fair? Is it smart? Is it, something with cool decisions, good interactivity? And I try to evaluate all those in the reviews. But everything is a matter of perspective, and we are culminations of all the experiences that came before us, and that's how two people can have very valid, very different views on one product, and someone can say, I'm bored to death of Terraforming Mars, and then another person can be like, this is, to me, one of my favorite games of all time.
Yeah.
Best tends to be more of that strive for objectivity. People going like, well, okay, I guess chess is the best game ever. Or, but anytime where you get into that like real academic area, there's almost like oh, fine, okay, I'll admit that this one is probably the best, or, this or that.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I don't buy it. I think that there is a lot more subjective in every sort of evaluation, and I do think that those intangibles should be considered in what we try to evaluate as, like meaningful best reviews.
Yeah, and I think that, even in this comment, saying Arc Nova is maybe the best game they ever played, but Board Game Geek would say it's Brass Birmingham. And the Board Game Geek rankings that is all subjective. That is just people's rankings. But then when you've taken those rankings and been like, okay, on average, this one has the highest ranking. But even that is just that is everybody's subjectivity, and that kind of becomes objectivity in a way, but it still comes from so much subjectivity where
right.
It's just yeah,
in aggregate it becomes like a meaningful data point
closer to objective,
right?
But I don't think it's possible to reach objective with art.
Yeah.
Or craft.
Well, with all this discussion, how about we end it with right now, are there 2 or 3 games on your shelf that if you were doing a top 10, top 20, top 100 games of all time, that would have to float in the top?
Yes. I have the things that I would say are my if I had to say these are the 3 games that I will pretty much never say no to, given that time constraints aren't an issue.
Right.
Would be at the moment Arcs, Spirit Island with any combination of anything, and honestly probably Dune Imperium. That's completely in the face of what Retro Meta Gamers say. So sorry, Retro Meta Gamer, but this is a valuable data point for you, which is that you and I probably have differing opinions on games, and you can use that in the future. I don't think that you're incorrect inherently just because we differ in opinion on board games, because in some other ways I do agree with you. I agree that I have more fun playing Betrayal at House on the Hill than Mansions of Madness for a lot of the same reasons you do. But Dune Imperium would probably be definitely in my top 10. I don't know necessarily if it's top 3, but it's definitely in top 10, for sure.
For my own, the last time that I did a top 20 video, which was years ago, so this is a topic that maybe we need to get back to, and we could also do that exercise. Maybe that's a podcast idea of our desert island, well, maybe not desert island, but you're moving cross country and you only kept 10 games. What are the 10 games?
I started that video. But
yeah, I know, right? Tell me about it. But the last time I did that, I had Spirit Island, Root and Terraforming Mars were the top three. And I think that those are still pretty much there, with the exception being that Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition was the game that won out when I was evaluating whether I wanted to keep both of those, and so I think Ares Expedition would probably be on there. I don't know that they would all fall in the top three or in that specific order, but they certainly would have to be in the top 10 and likely in the top 5. So, like, my tastes have changed over time. I have kind of like shaped and refined my palate, and there is always a bias when you have like reviewers like us. You see this in movie critics all the time, where people are like, oh, I love that movie, why do all the critics hate it? It's because critics have to watch so many effing movies that of course they're going to prioritize originality, because they are completely null to like anything that smacks of just kind of laziness.
And once more, it's The Rock in an action film.
Exactly. Whereas the general audience may be more responsive to that because they don't see as many films. Same thing with board games. We play tons of games, so I prioritize originality, things I haven't seen. But even still, if I were to go back 5 years later from the time that I last did that list, I know it was pre-COVID, I think definitely Spirit Island is going to be in the top 3. And then Ares Expedition, representing Terraforming Mars, and Root are probably going to be up there.
I'd be interested to see how many solo games have been made their way onto your list because of COVID.
Yeah. I was dabbling in. I was solo curious pre-COVID, but COVID definitely got me into the zone of playing a lot more, as with so many people. I don't know. It might be time. It might be time for us to do our big old lists.
Do you think with our departure from the Beancast, we've scared off Dwayne Johnson from being on the podcast?
I think that Dwayne Johnson might not come on, but The Rock might. You know what I'm saying?
I think that's fair. Well, maybe on the horizon. That is going to be our next guest. Possibly our next guest.
Possibly
could in theory be Dwayne The Rock Johnson. So
now you're YouTubing. Now
continue tuning in. Thank you to our listeners for watching. Please feel free to send in any questions or comments you have to us at Cardboard Herald, thecardboardherald@gmail.com.
Just cardboardherald@gmail.com.
Just cardboardherald@gmail.com. I went back and forth on which one was correct.
YouTube is the Cardboard Herald.
YouTube is the Cardboard Herald, and that's also a great place that you can reach us at. Comment on this podcast once it goes up, or on your favorite streaming platform if it has comment capability. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any podcast topics you want to see us hit, please feel free to let us know. As always, I am Eric, joined by Jack. Thanks for listening.
Bye.